Trials of Mana is the third game in the Mana series and either a sequel or prequel to the previous games, depending on how you interpret the story. Or so I've read. I don't know how they're supposed to connect. Anyway, released in 1995, it was a Japanese exclusive for decades and didn't get an official Western release until 2019, when Square came out with Collection of Mana, which contains the first 3 Mana games. Before that, fans of the series resorted to using emulators and fan-translated ROMs to play what was known here as Seiken Densetsu 3 until the aforementioned Collection came out, which shows the dedication and love for the series that many had after Secret of Mana's success in the West. I never had any of that love. The Mana series was brand new to me until recently. In the past year, I've played both of the previous installments, and my fondness for the first game, Final Fantasy Adventure, has only grown. I love that game. While I've remained somewhat neutral on Secret of Mana, that one is fun, but its flaws prevent me from seeing it as the masterpiece that some do. Maybe I'll review that one in the future for this channel. Go ahead and leave a comment if that's something you'd want to see. Trials of Mana is difficult to review as its flaws are more significant than Secret of Mana's, while its highs are even higher than Final Fantasy Adventures. The game's world itself is downright beautiful, one of the best looking SNES games I've ever played. There's a day-night system that makes every location worth running through twice just to see the differences in visuals. Speaking of beautiful, you get to choose your party this time around, a first for the series, and there are 6 unique characters to pick from, each with different weapon sets and abilities. They all have great designs. You can tell Square had mastered sprite-based art by the time the SNES reached its twilight years. Characters aren't the only differentiating factor from the older games. There are 3 separate stories, depending on which character you choose first, and while all stories traverse mostly the same parts of the world map, there are major differences in how and where the stories begin, a few dungeons, and the set of bosses you'll face, including the primary antagonist and final boss. This adds tremendous replay value, especially since the combat has been further expanded from Secret of Mana, with each character having special abilities and attacks, almost all of which are useful. Furthermore, each character gets the opportunity to change their class twice, with 2 options to choose from each time, resulting in a ton of variety for future playthroughs. It helps that every character feels viable. In my first playthrough, I chose Reese the Amazon, Hawkeye the Thief, and Charlotte the Elven Cleric, purely because they looked the coolest and I wasn't disappointed. After a class change, Reese provides useful buffs to the party, Hawkeye is an offensive beast with many special attacks, and Charlotte is a strong healer who can also dish out damage when needed. All in all, the game was on the easy side with this party, but the frantic style of action required constant attention and, in my case, healing to survive. It's a little tougher without a dedicated healer, but that's not really my style. Unlike in Secret of Mana, offensive magic isn't broken here. In fact, unless you choose Charlotte or Angela the Mage as one of your party members, you won't get to use much of it until at least the first class change. This is a nice improvement that makes the game feel closer to Final Fantasy Adventure in terms of difficulty. But unfortunately, bugs and severe lag damage the experience to an almost irredeemable degree. I qualify this with almost carefully, as while the technical problems with Trials of Mana remain noticeable throughout the game, I did eventually acclimate to them and enjoy the game in spite of them. These problems include severe lag in the menus, to the point where the game feels broken unless you get used to waiting for what feels like a second or more to open your items menu, transition between screens on the main menu, or even move the cursor or make a selection. I thought the Collection of Mana version of the game was messed up somehow, but nope, turns out that's how the game has always been. Thankfully, there's no lag in the radial selection wheels during combat, but it's also not quite as snappy as in Secret of Mana. And combat has its own set of bugs. Sometimes your character will do an extra attack when they're not supposed to. Well, that's not that bad, but there's also a charge time between attacks, and sometimes it just doesn't work. However, it's shorter than in either of the previous two games, and it doesn't change throughout the adventure, giving you a nice rhythm to combat that's even more satisfying than Secret of Mana's, when you don't randomly attack twice in a row, that is. Other times, seemingly at random, you won't attack when you press the button to do so, even when your weapon has charged. And while not a bug, movement is very slow in combat and took me a while to adjust to. All of these concerns are major issues and likely the reason the game never initially got a Western release. Frankly, this amount of bugs is unacceptable for a SNES game, and I'm surprised it even got a release in Japan, and from Square no less. I managed to fight through these qualms, however, since the rest of the game was enjoyable. The art is stunning, the music is perhaps the best in the whole series, and the variety of locales, beautiful character design and animations, and I was kept interested for the duration of my adventure. I'm eager to play the 2020 remake sometime soon. All in all, I'd recommend Trials of Mana to anyone who's a fan of the older games in the series, but only if you don't mind having to deal with a lot of bugs. That's it for this one. Thanks for watching.